What has happened in Post Shifters? Welcome to another episode of the Post Shift Podcast. I think we're on episode 62 or 63 right now. If you haven't noticed this week, I've been trying to do a podcast every single day, gain you information from people who are doing initiatives and legislation changes and just a whole bunch of different people. And I've been so happy and grateful of all these people taking time out to chat to me and try and get as much information to the hospitality industry as I possibly can. But I have been put into an interesting situation where I have usually at least a month ahead banked episodes from industry people that I've interviewed. Whenever I have the available time, I usually try and bank it up so that I don't have to stress about a week-to-week basis. But what this does mean is that I've got episodes that are pre-COVID-19. And so I have hour-long episodes with people before this all sort of hit the fan, or shit hit the fan. So what I'm doing now is I'm going back to those people and trying to get some telephone interviews going so that I can sort of see where they're sitting and how they're doing post-COVID-19 closures and all that sort of stuff, and then going into the episode that I taped with them earlier. So this week's episode is with Daniela Cubelic from Silk Road Teas here in Victoria, an amazing entrepreneur. We have the best chats. She's just the most amazing, most knowledgeable person. I could talk to her for hours and hours and hours and hours. And the great thing is that she just knows what I need. And so I texted her today and said, hey, I really would love to chat to you about this post everything that's happening. And she's like, cool. We get on the phone call and bang, we straight into it. It's the same thing with the interview that's after that. So we've got a nice little 5 to 10 minute prequel about what's going on now, and then we roll into the episode of that I taped a few weeks ago. So I hope you enjoy this episode, guys. I hope that the information that I'm getting to you every day is helpful in some way, shape, or form. Tell me what you need from me, and I will try and facilitate it the best I can. But have a good weekend, guys. I'll see you soon. Bye.
No, I mean, obviously, it's very, we all find ourselves in a very difficult and precarious moment. So no, it's been very interesting. Our stores are closed right now, and we are doing curbside pickup. So we are, allowing clients to order online, and then then they come by and we do a touchless procedure with them where they can pick up items. And we're, staying a good distance away from them. And then, of course, luckily we do offer online shopping. And so we're fulfilling orders that way from our production facility. But doing it in a fairly, we have a very small crew, over there right now, and, practicing really extreme social distancing there too, just to make sure that everybody stays healthy and well and all of that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Did you have to do a lot of layoffs and stuff?
I did, yeah. So, for our retail, for the retail side of the business, unfortunately, I did have to lay off, a lot of my retail staff. And also, of course, the spa at our Chinatown store is not something, you can't perform spa services when you need to be at least 6 feet away from the person that you're, performing a spa service. So we have done temporary layoffs, and obviously, my goal, one of my key goals is to actually, look for ways to get my staff back. And hoping that, if our online orders, continue to grow, which, they have been, so that if our online orders continue to grow and our curbside pickup grows, that we can start bringing people back, to work. And then of course, the new information just came out about the wage subsidy that the federal government is offering. And so I'm looking into that as well. And so through a combination of those things, I'm hoping to get people back, sooner rather than later. But yeah, I know it's amazing how, something like this can happen, and so quickly, everything shifts, so, because of course the reality is that, on the wholesale side of my business, so many of our wholesale, accounts are all, cafes and restaurants who've all had to close, or hotels who have also had to, who are not really operating right now. So yeah, it's a very challenging time. It's very handy that I've literally done every single job in the company over the years, because I'm, able to jump in and do whatever needs to get done. And so, so I've also, been packing boxes sometimes. And getting orders ready for clients for ship out. And I guess the other side of it too is that, in a way, I'm also lucky. I'm lucky that, the company started with very little. And so, I know what it's like to have to basically do a lot with very little resources. And so it's sort of not, I've never been somebody who, who's used to just having a million staff that do everything for me. Like, I'm very hands-on in a way. And so I'm lucky that I'm as hands-on as I am, because it's not like I think some business owners are confronting right now the fact that the situation demands of them that they suddenly get very hands-on in their business and they don't know how to do it, kind of a thing. Whereas for me, I'm in the trenches a lot. So, so it's easy to be, it's easy to be back in the trenches.
Just going back to when you were 20 years old.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. And so, so it's, and and I think, obviously, I think, very profound, this is going to have a very profound impact on, on the hospitality sector, and the effects of it are really, are not going to be known for some time, because I think what we're reading right now is indicating that we might have several rounds of social distancing, and that this could go on for quite a long time. So yeah, I think that these, and certainly for retail as well. I think that, if we end up getting, it's very likely that we'll have social distancing again leading into the Christmas season, which, is going to be, really affecting a lot of retail businesses, because it's their prime season, and certainly, for us it will be too. So, but so I think, I think it's more important than ever that we all kind of, come together as a community. And of course, Victoria is amazing for that, right? We just, it's a place that people really come together. And so I think, we need to come together, and, we need to be, one of the things I've been doing is reaching out to some of my, favorite, as much as I can, reaching out to some of my favorite folks in the hospitality, and restaurant sector, and asking how they're doing, and what we can do, and if we can support in some way. And I've actually, been working on a little initiative, that, is going to involve actually donating some products to staff who have been laid off from some of the different restaurants and cafes in town. Because I think the most difficult thing, with my own staff that I've had to lay off, and it was very profoundly difficult for me to do that. We've been keeping their spirits up with, a regular supply of Silk Road goodies, because it's hard enough to be laid off in general, but to be laid off when you've got this kind of really distressing situation that's going on is that much harder, right? And so you're sitting around at home all day, getting increasingly freaked out in some cases. So we're going to be reaching out to folks in the hospitality sector, and actually talking to employers who've laid people off, and actually maybe getting some lists from them, of staff, and offering them some items to just help them feel better, like some nice tea and some of our aromatherapy products, and just to kind of support their well-being. while we all go through this.
That is amazing. And I appreciate it because I've been toying around, like, I just love how we can bounce off each other because you just roll straight into exactly what I would have asked the question for.
Yeah.
And so I've got 3 episodes that I taped pre all this that I've got coming up. And so I'm reaching out to the people I interviewed and sort of talking about how is life now? Because there's just, I was in Vegas a week before this all happened, or 2 weeks before this all happened. And I sat down with 2 good friends who had just opened bars and stuff. And now all their stuff is shut. And so you go from having a very jovial conversation about the brand new place you have to post-COVID is kind of like, well, now life's really hitting the skids because Vegas really shut down. Incredibly so. But thank you very much for your time. That was perfect. I'll put that in front of the interview for tomorrow.
Okay, sounds great. And I'll keep you posted. And I'll keep you posted actually about the program. Like, I mean, in terms of like what we're planning on doing, because I think, we really want to get out there and start gifting some stuff to people because it's just, I think it's such a hard time.
That's
such a hard. So yeah. Okay.
That'd be great. Thanks, Dee.
Okay. Take care. Okay. Bye.
So Post-Shifters, that was Dee on the phone just talking about everything that's post-COVID-19 right now. And this is the interview that I had with her a couple of weeks ago, which this week's episode and next week's episode is really going to shine a light on before all this sort of happened and sort of the struggles that we were having already before this sort of happened. So it sort of does shine some serious light on retail and hospitality as it stands before all this happened. So it's a really good contrast and really shows the dichotomy of pre and post COVID is going to look like. So hope you enjoy this episode, guys. Thanks a lot. Bye.
We're really busy and continuing to grow the online side of things.
Do you find it's good?
Yeah, like it's really, well, I mean, I think we are in an interesting time as far as retail goes, right? So I think, our retail environments are very popular and clients love them. But I think as far as like retail as a sector, like it's, I think it's a challenging sector to be in right now. And again, we are very lucky because our retail locations are popular and they continue to be. But it's a combination of all kinds of different things as far as instability goes in the sector. And then on top of that, also, the labor market too, right?
Yes.
So, when you're, there's fewer people who are, there's a labor market shortage, right? So, when you're looking at opening other stores, you really need to consider that. And I think, one of the interesting things too, is adapting to the different personalities that, millennials as a workforce are. And I think, I know this from all your hospitality training and stuff too, right? But we have a generation of people who, grew up interacting online, whether it's their phones or, whatever devices. And so some of their interpersonal skills are weaker than what we would have seen 15 years ago with entry-level employees, right? So there's certain things that you're having to do now that you didn't have to do before, right? And and things even like, training on eye contact and, and training on on delivering a high standard of service is more complex than it used to be. Because there were things that people used to have coming out of the gate. Whereas, things like small talk and, all of those different types of things have shifted. But the thing is that I think a large majority of your customers don't really realize that, right? And so when you have somebody that's, we've had some, we have some amazing employees, but, it's funny, I remember a couple of years ago, we had someone who was really amazing and just very customer service focused and all those different types of things, but some of the most basic things. And I had a strong desire to give good service and all of that kind of stuff. But, it was funny because, there were some customers in the lineup and, and she saw them and then she didn't really acknowledge them, but then walked behind a cash desk to help them. But I could see the customers in the lineup basically going, she's staring at me like she's like, you know, and you know, and what was missing from that piece was for her to say, oh, I see you.
Come on down.
And I'm on my way to kind of help you, kind of a thing.
Especially for your store, I find that your training level, every time you walk in, every single staff member says, hello, how are you?
Yes.
Like it's a very personable thing.
Yes.
It's not like every single person gets acknowledged.
Yes.
And so it's hard.
It is hard. Well, no, and it is hard because I think, because again, I think that those are skills that are not, you know, those are skills that people had, you know, as just, those were considered a baseline kind of skill, and they're not anymore. And so we have to do more and more of that kind of training to maintain a level of service, you know, kind of a thing. I mean, on the other hand, I would say, you know, what's interesting about millennials is that they're very value-based, and of course, Silk Road is very values-based. And so there's really a synchronicity there, like in terms of being able to find people who really are committed to who we are and what we're about and all of those different types of things. But I would say, to go back to the earlier side of things, you know, I think it's just, you know, I think, you know, when you're looking at opening stores, particularly because we care so much about the quality of service and the in-store experience and all of that kind of stuff, it takes more, right? And particularly because also I really value being an independent business and, you know, and what that affords me, as far as being able to control quality and focus on these things that really matter, you know, and sustainability and stuff. You know, those are things that, you know, I think, you know, if you're looking to grow retail in a big way, you know, you have to start taking on investors and doing all kinds of other things that then change the shape of what you're doing.
While we're paying X for this tea, while we're paying X for that tea.
Exactly. Yeah, you know, and then that starts to drive your business, right? You know, kind of a thing. And I mean, in the same way too, I mean, I think it's one of those things where, you know, I mean, you know, people have been interested in doing franchises with me for a really long time. And it was something that, you know, people, you know, I started getting approached very early on, and I looked into it in the early days. But it was one of those things where I quickly, as I started to analyze it, realized that the challenge was going to be that in a way, the franchisees start to become a really important component of the business. And if anything, they're driving your decisions a lot, right? Because you need to help make them successful. And so your relationship is not really direct to the client anymore. It's to the...
It's B2B, yeah.
Exactly, you know, kind of a thing. And that's not who I am and what I'm about, right? I was like, this is not going to give me joy. I sense this is not going to give me joy, and it's going to change the shape of what I'm doing, because for me, it's about the product and the quality and all, you know, and all of that kind of stuff, and then the customer experience and the quality and all of that kind of stuff. And when I have to look at customers in a transactional way, I don't like that. Or when I have to look at the business in a transactional way, you know, I don't really like that kind of a thing. So
you're the last person you think about.
Well, yes, it's true. It's true. It's true. No, it's true for sure. So yeah.
So how long has Silk Road been open now?
28 years.
28?
28.
Jesus.
28. We're just coming on 28 the end of March.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was 22 when we opened. So now with easy math, you can figure out that I just turned 50. I just turned 50.
Wow. You don't look 50. It must be the
It's all the tea.
Yeah.
That's right. So yeah, it's been a long time.
So was this the original store?
Yes.
So you've always been here?
Well, true, but the store has changed and the size of the store has changed. So on opening, the store was, and cheers, we've got some tea here. Cheers. Nice bit of Iron Goddess Oolong, and I know you're an Oolong lover.
I do like that one. Yeah, that's right up my alley.
So originally, so when you come into the store, the first, like when you first walk in, that side of the store is the original sort of side of the store. And then probably about, and I can be really terrible at remembering dates, But so probably about about 12 or 13 years in, the space that the tea bar is now on became available. And so then after a big renovation, which was kind of funny in a way because all the renovations have involved actually taking back the original character of the space. So removing the modern renovations and kind of taking back, so there were sort of two false ceilings and tiles and all kinds of different things. But so probably about, I think 12 or 13 years in, expanded to the side of the store. It's been a long time.
And Vancouver's been open for about 5 years now?
Vancouver's been open, I think it's probably getting close to 5. Yeah. I think we're like at 4 now.
What? Yeah. Okay, so as a 22-year-old woman, what made you open a tea house? Because 1992, I think... We look now, we've got great coffee culture and cocktail culture and food culture and all these sort of things. Like 1992, there was none of that.
No, there was none of that. And even really coffee wasn't really a thing at that point. It's funny. First of all, I had the obscure habit of being interested in tea at a young age. So in a way, I was actually a very old, young person, but now tea is making me a kind of a very young old person. So it's kind of worked out quite nicely. But so... I really, I had a fascination with tea from a fairly early age. Like I came from a tea drinking family. And I became really interested in Asian tea, and Asian tea traditions. And it was purely just a hobby. And I actually envisioned myself having a career in the Foreign Service. Mm-hmm. So I was very interested in diplomacy and very interested in travel and other cultures. So tea very much intrigued me for a variety of reasons. I mean, there were the health benefits, and the flavors and all of that kind of stuff. But then there was also the culture component that was very interesting, and the history. And I studied history. I went on to study history in university. And I mean, tea really, if you look at tea from a holistic kind of Asian perspective, like it's health, it's well-being, but it's history, it's also art. I mean, tea influenced ceramic production. I mean, tea is the reason why a lot of famous porcelain houses opened in Europe, because they were trying to figure out a way how to make porcelain, and it was actually the Chinese that knew how to make it. In Asia, tea has influenced poetry, and I mean, there's so many different elements to it. So it's a very rich and deep subject matter if you really get into it. And I kind of thought, in a way, this was sort of all going to help me at some point in the future with my Foreign Service career, because it was sort of this way of understanding other cultures. Mm-hmm. And really, again, when you look at tea ceremonies and tea rituals, you really can learn a lot about that culture and what's important to them and how they interact, and their values come through in the tea ceremonies and tea traditions. And again, whether we look at the UK and afternoon tea and what that sort of symbolizes and means, and where that came out of, or the Middle East, Moroccan tea traditions, or there are tea traditions throughout the Middle East. It's about hospitality. It's about sharing time, and really, and really being a very gracious and welcoming host. And those are really, really key, important things in those cultures. Or in Japan, if we look at the tea ceremony there, it's about ritual, it's about spirituality, it's about, in a way, living life as a ceremony. Like there's all these kind of, and hugely aesthetic components to it as well, and a very strong link to Zen Buddhism in particular. So there's all of these different, sort of layers to it. And so anyway, that was just kind of this really becoming this big passion of mine. And I was actually spending a lot of time hanging out in Chinatown here in Victoria. And to make a very long story short, the opportunity came up to sublease in the original space that Silk Road was in. And I just actually I was still pretty young at that point. And of course, like, you know, thinking about going into the Foreign Service, you know, I'd gone into university straight out of high school, and thinking about going into the Foreign Service, like I would have needed to kind of take a break, then take a master's, you know, and all of those different types of things. And I was like, you know, and anyway, so this opportunity sublease came up, and I was like, you know what, I'm young now and I'm poor now, and that's okay for me. I don't know if it will be as I get older, you know, and so I really, like, it felt like kind of the circumstances aligned, and that I could do it in a way that was relatively low risk. And, you know, and that I could just, and I was very passionate about sharing the knowledge that I had acquired. And so I thought, I can do this for a while and, you know, and see how it goes. And really, I wasn't thinking about it from a long-term perspective at that point. I was really just thinking about, you know, I'm excited about this idea, and I can't stop thinking about this idea now that this idea has kind of, been made possible. And, you know, and ironically, what happened is that, like, I think, you know, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but it turned out that I actually really enjoyed the business side of it too, which you don't really know until you do it. You know? And, you know, and I think luckily for me, you know, I mean, I still come at what I do very much as a passion for the subject matter. But at the same time, the business side I found interesting, you know, and there were interesting problems to solve and interesting, you know, things to learn, and stuff. And so I was lucky, because I think a lot of people who start a business from the passion side, they're not always good at the business side, you know, and so then it all kind of tends to suffer. And in my case, you know, I sort of was good enough at the business side and was good at learning on the go, and like huge learning curve, huge learning curve. Like, I think you don't, you know, I think really, you know, running a business and growing a business from sort of nothing is something that is really quite challenging. And I think unless you've been there and done that, you don't really know. But yeah, and I just continued to kind of find it interesting and captivating in different ways. And I think, you know, I'm a very growth oriented person. And so for me, I think what's interesting, you know, is that my job description keeps changing in a way, right? So that the needs of the business that were there in the early stages when I was always on the retail floor, and that went on for a really long time, you know, are different from now when the business has grown, and, you know, and I don't get to be on the retail floor very much at all, you know, kind of a thing, because that's not really, you know, in the grand scheme of things, there's other things that I need to be doing for the organization. But it continues to change and evolve, and I find that really exciting and dynamic and interesting.
Because I'm kind of trying, like, 1992, I was 12. But, like, and my dad's from the UK, so tea, but it wasn't good tea.
Right,
like, orange pico and bag. Was 1992 that sort of spot where there was still a relevance for loose leaf and sourcing and stuff, and then the tea bag thing was sort of, I think the tea bag thing was prevalent, but it's got bigger?
Well,
were you in that sweet spot?
Yes, I mean, in a way, when you look back on it now, you could sort of say it was a sweet spot. Certainly at the time, it didn't feel like a sweet spot. In the sense of, at the time, it was very, like, people were not drinking a lot of different types of tea. Or good tea at all. Yeah. Like, I think people had no understanding of what good tea was for the most part. And loose tea was also not a thing. Like, people were not drinking loose tea. And so it was something like there was, it was a good thing that I liked education, because there was an insane amount of education that went on, you know, and so people were just kind of constantly like, sort of like, you know, why is this better than, you know, kind of my tea bag tea, you know, kind of a thing. And, you know, and it's not as bitter as my tea bag tea. And, you know, and so it was really like, so there was a lot of education. And and actually, you know, a lot of resistance too, to the idea of drinking loose tea. Like, well, like, why bother? Like, I've got these tea bags, and like, what, you know, and I can get, you know, 500 tea bags for $2.99. So like, why would I want to drink this? Yeah. You know, kind of a thing. So, I would say that the things that, The things that made it possible, though, were, I mean, one, I was obsessed with tea and obsessed with educating about tea. And not really, and finding it actually, sort of exciting to educate people about tea, even though like a lot of it was just kind of like, why should I be drinking this? Why should I be, sort of kind of a thing. I would say in 1992, I mean, Victoria's a foodie place, and it has been for a long time. So even though, there weren't a lot of like, sort of, like the idea of loose tea and all those things was not really big. On the other hand, people were interested in good quality things. Like, so there was some interest and enthusiasm for flavor and taste. And that was a really compelling part where, a lot of it was just, I just needed to have people taste it, kind of a thing. And once they tasted it, they would go, oh, like this is, like this tastes so much better, and then they, and I'd get a lot of comments. And I mean, some of those comments I still get, but they just sort of go, well, I'd like black tea if black tea tasted like this. I thought I hated black tea, but actually I don't hate black tea, or I thought I hated green tea, but actually I don't hate, so, and so I think, so there was a lot of that. The other thing too is certainly like on the West Coast here, we're very lifestyle oriented. So I think people have been interested in products that are good for their health for a long time. So that was another big driver, I would say, in those early years around, people were, early adopters to like reading about the health benefits of green tea, but a lot of that didn't even start to come out until more like 1995, 97, like, that kind of, sort of later on, but people were interested in kind of healthy things. So that was very much a factor too.
I like to always remind people that the internet didn't exist then either. Like, when you read about something, it was in a book or like, and there was very rarely any cocktail books or any tea books or anything like that. For sure. There was always a newspaper. You couldn't go on your phone and go, and get a little blip on Facebook.
That's right. No, that's right. And so people would, so people, people might read something in a magazine or whatever it was, but information traveled much more slowly at that point too, for sure. For sure. And that has its pluses and minuses, but people were like, they were sort of generally very interested in health benefits. And, and I mean, I think, one of the other things too is that, the product quality was good and unusually good, like in the sense that people were not used to things tasting as good as they were. And so then what that meant was a lot of people would introduce other people to Silk Road. And so we would just get a lot of word of mouth business. And, and I mean, we couldn't afford to advertise anyway. Like, so, I mean, because I mean, the other side of it too is that, ads in those days cost a fortune, right? Kind of a thing. So there really wasn't a budget for advertising, but word of mouth really was very effective in terms of spreading the word, and getting people in here. And I think, and it's interesting too, because now, people look at this location and they just say, what a brilliant, what a brilliant and amazing location, kind of a thing. And, and it's funny too, because, really it was something that became a destination as a result of really a lot of hard work to kind of create that. And it was, and it was something that, but I mean, it was certainly not like back in those days, like this location was it felt very out of the way for people, so I'd have to describe it, and it would be the sort of very like, well, it's in Chinatown, it was like, where in Chinatown? Like, and like, it just was like the far reaches, this, kind of a thing. And, and again, like this area was less built up. So for instance, like the CRD building that's now across the street, there was just like a low slung building there that, had a seniors activity center, the opening to Centennial Square, like there was a very narrow opening to Centennial Square. So it didn't have that kind of sort of easier passage through, Mountain Equipment Co-op wasn't down the street. There was like a sort of a government office building that was there. And so really, like, I mean, even just when tourists were coming down here, they would really just stop at Johnson Street generally, and then some of them would know about Chinatown and kind of be driven to sort of head down to Chinatown. But it was still like there was very much a kind of
one block further.
Exactly, one block too far kind of a thing. And but I mean, I also knew in a way that I was onto something when we started to get all these amazing referrals. Like for instance, somebody that worked at the travel information center in Port Angeles, as an example, came in, fell in love with the tea, and suddenly just was sending tons of people. And so we'd have all these American tourists coming in, sort of saying like, I heard about you, so they were traveling that block further, and of course other people were traveling that block further. But yeah, it was very much a different. It was a very different time.
Was there any point where you were like, oh crap, I've made a horrible mistake?
Oh well. Yeah. That's right. Well, I don't think you can,
Well, as an entrepreneur, you always doubt yourself.
No, you know what? For sure. Like, I think it's funny, I would say that there was a part of me that once I started doing this, felt this strong connectedness and what I would describe as almost a calling to do it that was louder than anything else about not to do it. And so when I encountered problems, and there were many, and I think, it's one of those things where anybody who's had a business for any length of time has probably been through things that are completely harrowing. They just don't talk about them a lot, but the thing is that every day was a struggle. Every day, I remember there being, times, literally, it was just sometimes a $50 sales day was woo, and so there were, and there was a lot. And there were huge learning curves, and just, so on one level, for sure, there was the day in and the day out of this is hard, and there were times when it's this isn't working, right? Kind of a thing, and I remember it was one of those things where I started to realize fairly quickly, I was okay, if I'm not basically making around $300 a day, this isn't going to work, right? So things need to change in order for me to get to that level. But at the same time, there was something in me that also was so compelled to do it that it was always about finding solutions to the problems of the day, and that's where I tended to focus my attention. So it was always problem, what's the solution going to be? And I know that there are solutions, and I think and looking back at that now, it was interesting because at the time, sometimes 2 years in, somebody would come around and they'd have all this family money that somebody invested in them, and they'd start a business up, right? Kind of a thing. And, or they got money from wherever, and I would sometimes look at those people with envy because they'd just be busy going, oh, what lighting should I get for my business? And meanwhile, it's I'm making do with kind of sort of whatever.
What am I giving the secondhand store?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, and I remember that feeling of envy, but the thing that I started to recognize over time was that scarcity produces rigor, right? And I think that for a lot of entrepreneurs, you actually you're excited about an idea, right? And that passion gets you to do it. And maybe you have a really good instinct about that because it's an area of expertise for you and you develop this passion for it. So you know the subject matter of what you're doing really well. But there's another side of it, which is running the business. And so I think that what happens sometimes is that, if you're not careful, you just are trapped in the cycle of bad decision making, right? That's all kind of gut instinct. And that doesn't have enough rigor around it, where you're basically asking yourself questions around will this make money? Are people going to want this? All of these other things. And I think that on the one hand, having that passion is really important because that drives the ideas and stuff. But I think you also need to kind of be able to step back from the emotion of your ideas and say, is this actually a good idea? Is this going to work? And I think that the benefit of not having a lot of money is that you have to ask yourself that question. So like, if I'm going to make a decision about something, I better think it through really carefully and think about, is it going to work or not? And then if it's not working, I need to figure out how I'm going to make it work, right? And I think that's one of those things that also, it also drives innovation, right? Like when you're forced to have to make something work, and sometimes like a lot of success can come from those moments where you're like, crap, like, you're like, this brilliant idea I had that I invested money in, it's not working, like, kind of thing. And now what? So I do think that like, I think that like, so I think like in retrospect, I think that's helped me a lot. And I think that like, it's interesting because I think that, people who sometimes start a business with a business degree, they have the technical knowledge, but they lack that gut instinct and that passion and that can hinder them. But I think the reverse can also be true, right? Where if you're that entrepreneurial spirit, you can kind of just get carried away with yourself and just sort of like, sort of a thing. So I think that was very good for me. And now I would say, when I make decisions, I sort of, I make them in a, they're still always driven by that initial, the initial momentum to make a decision typically comes from that gut and that passion, right? So like, it comes from that sort of like deep knowledge of the brand and the customer and all of those different types of things. But then I do spend time going, okay, is this going to...
sticking within the mission statement.
Yeah, and is it going to work? So, and I do think, as far as business goes in general, like I think that we're in a very dynamic time, which can also be very challenging in the sense that tastes change, very rapidly. Like, information is shared so quickly now that trends come and go so quickly. And I think you need to be more on top of things in that way than it used to be. And I'll give you an example from the Silk Road side of things. Like, for instance, years ago, say 20 years ago, even 15 years ago, we had certain lines of teapots that literally just were solid performers year after year. And you just, literally we just had to stock them and have them. And that was just, what it was. Whereas now people really the trends are always changing. So you need to be so much more on top of, what is moving and what's not moving and be paying attention to where the customer is going and what their needs are. And that is far more dynamic than it ever was. And, and it's a combination of, ready access to things that they didn't used to because, everybody can buy everything online now. Right? So why do they want to buy the thing that you have? And, and choice is paralyzing for consumers and just for everybody in real life, right? Too many choices, you can't decide, right?
What do you think you find that with tea, the tea styles as well? Whereas 15, 20 years ago, it'd be okay, black tea is going to be popular for 18 months, 2 years. Now it's black tea is popular for a season.
I find tea to be less that way than goods.
Really?
Yeah. So I find tea to be less that way than goods, but for sure, I would say, there is very much, there's sort of, there's our basic teas that clients just year after year love, So, really, it's one of those things where, angel water is just forever popular and it seems to never, wane, kind of a thing. And people need their angel water, kind of a thing. But there is also a desire for newness and change and much more than there used to be. So, for instance, I would say before, customers were less oriented to kind of wanting to see new seasonal teas all the time. now there's much more of a demand and a desire to see seasonal teas, kind of a thing, and to see new things. And yes, I think that and I do think that within that context, sort of the tastes change, right? So so for instance, matcha was really hot for a while, and then a bunch of people started drinking matcha. But I would say that there's less of an ongoing conversion to people drinking matcha now than there was. I mean, there still continues to be, but people are kind of always, there is much more of a kind of, everybody wants the latest, thing, kind of a thing. So that's also going on. And then of course, but I mean, what we're dealing with on the other hand is we're dealing with that against the backdrop of the impacts of climate change on tea and on growing and on, and so the ability to sort of, have access to goods is shifting.
Is it dramatic?
It's pretty dramatic.
Yeah.
It is pretty dramatic. I mean, what's happening, and I mean, I've been watching this obviously for some time because I've had a front row seat to this, and because we're so, and I'm pouring another tea.
What's that one?
Oh, that's intriguing. Well, okay, so here's the thing about this one, it's not a blend. It's actually a single ingredient, but doesn't it taste like a blend? It tastes like there are many ingredients in it.
Yeah.
Like you can sort of taste
a little smoke. There's a little berry in there.
Yeah.
And then like a black tea background.
Yeah. So what this is actually Tulsi, which is an Ayurvedic herb, also known as holy basil. Okay. It is a related plant to basil, but it's got its own unique terroir and varietal that's emerged. And it's known in India as an elixir of life. It's considered a living embodiment of the gods.
Oh, wow.
So when something's a living embodiment of the gods, it's,
That's why you don't look 50.
Yeah. That's right. That's really, I've just got godlike superpowers on the inside now from drinking these things. Tulsi, Tulsi is a very powerful herb used in Ayurveda, and of course modern studies are starting to demonstrate that it has extraordinary benefits. So it's very, very high in antioxidants, actually has natural painkillers. Has a natural painkiller effect. It's also extremely anti-inflammatory. And one of the interesting things about it, of course, is that it has a very complex taste. And complexity of flavor, like a multi-dimensional flavor, is usually in one ingredient, is usually an indicator of high antioxidant value. And so it does, like it has a very high antioxidant value. It's also has an adaptogenic effect on our systems, which means that, and I love adaptogens, but what it means is that it gives your body what it needs when it needs it.
Oh.
So if you have this tea now, during the day, it can be gently energizing. If we have this tea at night, it's actually gently relaxing.
That's crazy.
It is. And it also, they've done, and not that I'm going to recommend this, but they've done some studies on this, and they found that it actually helps your body detoxify from heavy metals. Mm-hmm. So I'm not suggesting but it's just a good thing to have. But one of the other things about this that's really great is this ingredient. We support small, basically independent farmers that grow this, and it actually is a benefit to preventing climate change in India because it helps preserve rural areas, it helps provide stable incomes, and it's very, very good for the soil that it grows in. But back to climate change. So climate change, I've seen, like I would say for about the last 15 years, I started to see a shift. So what it used to be is that, in tea, you might have like one really great harvest season, like wine, right? You might have one like really great harvest season and then one not so good, but there was a fair amount of stability. And then what started to happen is you just increasingly started to get erratic seasonal shifts. And, you know, and I think one of the things that people don't really realize living here is that, like, climate change is one of those things that is affecting us here, but not quite as dramatically. Like, I would say it's probably been in the last 5 years in Victoria that people have really started to notice the shifts in the weather, right? So, like, you know how we now get the monsoon-like rains here? You know, kind of a thing? Like, heavy downpour, short period of time. And then longer, drier periods. Like, I would say I've really noticed that for about the last 5 years in Victoria, and most people have. Going back, and now we get the very heavy winds, which has maybe kind of been going on 5 to 10 years, kind of a thing. And I mean, and it's not that we, you know, and I grew up in Victoria, so I mean, it's a windy city, right? But the level of the winds have just kind of gotten more and more tornado-like. and so that the impact of climate change has been much more dramatic and much more far-reaching in the Southern Hemisphere. And so, for instance, like, whether we look at, like, you know, India is a good example. Their average rainfall patterns have changed dramatically. And so what they've had is, again, heavier monsoons and then much drier periods. And what happens as a result of that is that the plant is undergoing pretty extreme stress. A certain amount of stress is actually really good on plants, because a certain amount of stress activates their immune system, can increase their antioxidant levels and give you better flavor profile and health benefits. But at another level, it really can become destructive to plants. And what it also starts to do is fundamentally change the terroir that the plants are growing in. So you start to get a very different flavor profile from the plants. And especially when that happens year after year after year, right? Because it used to be like maybe 1 or 2 years you'd get a weird season, then things would sort of go back to normal. And sometimes when things went back to normal, that slightly weird season would, the 1 or 2 slightly weird seasons prior to that would create a better taste in the following year. Now what you have is, like, you know, this big shift that's happened where year after year after year, we've gotten this shift. And so now we're fundamentally changing the taste of ingredients. Unfortunately, what it's leading to is less complexity of flavor. So in a lot of cases, you're getting much more one-dimensional flavor because the plants are pushed too far to that stress point where now the stress is really no longer good for them and they're kind of like working hard to survive, right?
Yeah, they're literally putting leaves out just to survive and get a little bit of focus.
Exactly, right? So they're not as robust. The other thing too is that they're also like there's a tendency towards more bitterness. And you see that, I mean, you see that even, like, for instance, like locally grown herbs, right? Like, we used to grow beautiful, beautiful mint on the West Coast. Now, not as nice. It's much more bitter, more camphorous, less sweet. So those are all shifts that are happening. And I think, it is a very challenging time in the tea sector. It will continue to be more challenging because the other thing too is that alongside these flavor changes, which actually customers are having a lot of difficulty getting used to, and I mean, I've had, we've been doing a ton of education on this, but, to some clients, like, they're sort of like, but I love this tea and why has it changed? And it's like, well, in the case of, like, Darjeeling, for example, in India, which is a very famous tea growing region, there's really been an acknowledgement that some of those key flavor characteristics of Darjeeling may be gone forever.
Oh, wow.
Because it's just like the weather is changing too much. And so that beautiful muscatel, that characteristic muscatel flavor in Darjeeling teas, it's just, it may be gone forever. And I mean, and what's interesting about that too, about the Darjeeling as well, is that that muscatel flavor relies actually on local insects too. It's the interaction of the enzymes from local insects on the plant too. And so, again, when we start to change, when the ecosystem starts to change dramatically, we get a very big shift in terms of what's happening with insect life, with everything, right? So, so it's been a big, so it is like a really big shift in terms of, you know, and I mean, one of the things that I say a lot to clients now is if you love a tea and you're enjoying this particular harvest, buy a lot of it and drink it. Yeah. Because, and you just don't know. Because you just don't know, you know?
So from a business standpoint, from a business standpoint, like, how are your ideas and sort of direction changing for the future when you start seeing all these major regions changing so dramatically?
Well, it's a lot of, I mean, I've always been really passionate about supporting growers and supporting, you know, biodynamic farming and organic farming and all of these other things that are sustainable. And
before it was cool.
For sure. Yes. No, for sure. Yes. No, it's true. Oh no, for sure. You know, and biodiversity too, right? So, so all of those things, that I've been supporting for a long time, I'm even more passionate about supporting, and I'm using the opportunity of climate change to talk about these things more. And I mean, I have been talking about these things for a long time, but they didn't really resonate in the same way. So now people care about these things more. So talking about those things, educating people, you know, and I mean, even for instance, like we really, you know, we're not buying cloned tea, you know, a lot of tea comes from cloned plants, you know, like all of this stuff, all of these chickens are coming home to roost now, right? So anyway, so I think, so one, doubling down and supporting these people more and more, because these sustainable farming practices, like promoting biodiversity, organic farming, biodynamic farming, all of these plants are stronger, more resilient, and more hardy. And so if anything's going to survive, it's going to be these plants because they're a lot healthier. So that's one component. The other component is, you know, really educating clients about seasonality and getting what they love while they can and appreciating it for what it is, knowing that they may not be able to get it again or for who knows how long. You know, and I mean, as far as, you know, business plans go, being really flexible and agile. And I think that's also where that early training, you know, becomes super handy because it becomes, you know, because that ability to pivot, right? And that ability to be, you know, because I mean, it used to be, you know, that like guaranteed I would be able to get good quality lavender on an annual basis or good quality mint on an annual basis or, you know, any of those ingredients. Now there's just a big question mark, right? And so behind the scenes, there's a lot more work going on all the time in terms of ensuring that we've got, you know, kind of the level of quality the best level of quality that we can. But the challenge, of course, is that the best of the best of the best now is not always that great. And so figuring out that, and continuing to innovate, you know, and continuing to, I mean, you know, the thing is that there are things that are totally outside of our control, but also luckily for me, there's a depth of knowledge and ingredients and herbs and all kinds of other things. And so it's about looking at, okay, you know, what's available this year that's really delicious and that is interesting and that maybe I can introduce people to. So I think what you'll probably continue to see from us more and more is more ingredients that are seasonal, you know, more, and you see us actually, you know, I mean, if you've been paying attention and have been a Silk Road customer for a long time, you see more and more limited edition runs of teas because it's really sort of based on like what...
This is really good right now, buy it all,
yes.
Process it and sell it.
Exactly, you know, kind of a thing. So a lot of that. And again, luckily, you know, luckily for me, that kind of black box cooking in a way, you know, I've studied tea for a long time, and so I know how to blend ingredients and sort of, and look at things and do things. And so, you know, if we've got, if we've got a great batch of berries that we've had come in, then looking at how do we create something really delicious using those ingredients. But it's a very, I think, I think it's a very challenging time for us as a species, for the planet. And I think that looking at it one way, it can become very hopeless. Like, it can feel very hopeless, and it can sort of feel like, well, I might as well just like not do this anymore, kind of a thing. And then there's also another side of me that goes, okay, like, how do I help people? How do I help these farmers? How do I help continue the best possible agriculture that is the most sustainable for our planet? How do I continue to support that? How do I also create a product that makes people's lives enjoyable and adds to their day? And how do I, balance all of those different things and create some moments of beauty for them in their lives?
So you've talked about education for yourself personally.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, I know in my line of work, I don't have hobbies per se.
Yes.
Hobbies as my job.
Yes.
People when I travel and they're like, so what are you doing in the thing? I'm like, I'm going to a cocktail conference.
Yes.
Like, so business?
Yes.
I'm like, yes, it's business. It's business.
Yes.
Do you have personal hobbies? Because I know that you talk about education, your clientele and your customers and your staff, but you were extremely accomplished on the education front for yourself as well personally.
Yeah.
Do you have hobbies outside of work that...
Well, I mean, yes, but my hobbies tend to be, my hobbies for sure are very, very related to tea. It's very much like, sort of tea and aromatherapy. I mean, as a lifestyle, like, and I would say, so I mean, well, here's the thing. I love hiking. I love hiking. My spouse and I hike a lot. And so, I like hiking. I spend a lot of time hiking and in the forest. Of course, funnily enough, that evolved from a project I was working on with First Nations. I was volunteering and helping with some things, and then started to fall in love with spending time in the forest, and and that grew from that. And then, of course, I started creating a line of products. I started creating a line of skin and body care products that are made from ingredients sourced from the forest. I think I have this way of turning whatever I'm doing into part of what I do through Silk Road. And I think in part because I'm really attracted to all of these subjects, and then I'm the kind of person that if I found something that's really wonderful, I want to share it. And so that's how it sort of comes out. But I mean, I love to cook. I don't always have time for it. Over the last little while, I've been making more time for it again. And so then, of course, once I start cooking, I start, adding tea to food. And away we go, kind of a thing. So, but I mean, from an Asian perspective, like, when we look at, how tea is viewed, from a Chinese perspective, as an example, tea is a lifestyle, right? And I mean, in the way that arts are viewed, right? It's like you sort of, they're all interlinked, like health and well-being, philosophy, all of these things are sort of interlinked. So, and I tend to get a lot of inspiration from those things too. So, I mean, for instance, like right now I'm rereading, Korean tea classics.
As you do.
Yes, exactly. I know. And they can, and there's a lot of really beautiful poetry from from Korean tea masters from a long time ago. And I find them very inspiring. I find them it's what I'm drawn to. It's what I want to spend time, to spend time doing. So yeah, I mean, and it's funny because probably about 4 or 5 years into the business, I remember, and it was so busy, and it was so busy, and so intense. I remember sort of thinking that, like, I remember sort of turning to my spouse and saying, well, like, what's happened to my hobbies? And he was like, you turned them into a business. That's what's happened. That's what's happened to your hobbies. You don't, kind of, there's no room for, for anything else. So yeah, but I mean, I would say though that we bring who we are to everything that we do. And if we're really passionate about it, it feeds us and it fuels us, and we share that with other people. and I think, for me, in a way, like, my relationship to tea is a very powerful part of my life. And it's important to me that relationship be healthy. And it's the reason why, again, with Silk Road, there's a lot of decisions that I very deliberately not made around certain types of expansion that would have meant tainting that relationship that I have to the subject that I love. But part of what also always rejuvenates me is, spending time in this way, right? It's funny, like, I just pulled out, I pulled out some teacups at my house just the other day, and I was like, yes, I haven't seen these in a while. Now I'm going to be drinking from these. And it's got me inspired about some things that I'm going to share with clients. And, so there's, I think when you pick a subject, like there's a saying in China, which is that China produces more teas than France produces wines and cheeses combined, which I believe is true. And really, when you consider that China has like a 4,000-year-old tea history, it makes a lot of sense. It's huge, right? Yeah, it's huge. So, but I think when you pick something that has a lot of depth and history and knowledge, I know a little bit about cocktails and spirits and in the wine industry and all that kind of stuff. But I know, like, when I talk to you about those things, you're so passionate about those things, and you're very, you're always sharing intriguing tidbits about history and lore, and I think, and even like when I think about like the first cocktail menu that I encountered you with, which was, back in the Clives days, kind of a thing, like it was such a lovely presentation that got me interested in some of these different things, where you were like, oh, like, and this, I made this as an homage to this, and this is, and those, there's so much there. There's so much storytelling, and there's so much history and meaning, and, and all of those things that I think it brings you in. And I think, you and I are both very lucky that it so happens that something that we're very passionate about, we're good at sharing with other people. And then that gives us a lot of joy, right? And it's funny because for me, I have to say, like, I miss being on the retail floor, because I miss that connection with clients sometimes. So I have to find that connection in other ways, whether it's like, again, through launching new products or doing different things, because I want to still share that knowledge. It's really important for me to share that knowledge, and whenever I'm around the staff, like, they're always just like, wow, like, that was, it was like in 15 minutes, I learned so much. So, kind of a thing. But it's very enjoyable to be able to share that, because I really love to empower people with that knowledge and that information. So it's not just something like, I'm not a hoarder. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's like, it's interesting because I'm able to empower other people with that information and that knowledge. So, yeah.
What's the plan for 2020?
Well, for 2020, we've got more workshops coming up. We've got some more and more education in store and online coming up, and a couple of other things that I can't yet tell you about. But I will. But you will be at the top of the list of people I tell about some exciting things I'm working on. So yeah, something's always brewing.
Thank you so much for sitting down. I could literally talk to you for 2 hours.
And we have before.
We have. Oh, thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Thanks for listening, Pose Shifters. I hope you enjoyed that episode. I really enjoy sitting down with friends and peers and just chatting about the industry and getting down to the nuts and bolts of what's really going on out there. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, everything on all the platforms. Just hit it up and I'll do my best to answer any queries or questions you have. I'll see you next week, guys. Bye.